Hello, my name is Mary Now, and I'm the Director of Community Health Connections, a division of Milestone Centers Incorporated. We recently had the opportunity to interview author and international speaker David Hingsburger. We'd like to share with you our interview with him on the topic of spirituality. Thank you.
I think this is one of those questions that's very difficult to answer, because I think people with intellectual disabilities have often been forced to live lives with a faith that's not theirs, that a faith that's been imposed on them by a family, or a set of values that have been imposed upon them that is held by an agency. And at the same time, people with disabilities have often not been allowed to experience spirituality because they live in more secular service where those things aren't valued and so forth. So I think it's a difficult question, because I haven't seen yet a lot of freedom for people with disabilities around discovering their own spirituality. I mean, I've seen people with intellectual disabilities who are placed into a service that is a religious-based service. It's not their faith, but they had a space, so they were taken, and then they've had to spend the rest of their lives living to the tenets of a faith that don't espouse them. And I have a lot of difficulty with that, because I don't think that's fair. They didn't choose to be there, but they're there by just the circumstances of their lives. So given all those things, I think spirituality is massively important. And I think maybe the older I get, the more important that I think that is, because I think we have to help people with disabilities get some kind of relationship with themselves, okay? And to me, even that's a spiritual journey. You know, we help people with disabilities in so many different ways, but I think it's important that people with disabilities firstly develop a relationship, and the most primary relationship they have is with themselves. Who am I? What do I believe? What's my moral structure? What do I think is right? What do I think is wrong? What is my opinion? Who am I? And how do I relate both to myself, and how do I relate to my spirit? I think those are things that are really at the crux of what it is to be human. And I think it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And it's interesting when you see staff get into battles. I mean, we have a situation where a person with a disability expresses interest into going to this church, and we have a staff saying, I'm not taking him to my church, that's not my church, I don't go to that church. And we've had to teach, you know, staff that you're not going to church, you're assisting somebody with going to church. And when people with disabilities ask questions around faith, what we get is staff preaching to them, not answering them, you know. So it's dangerous, I think, you know, because I would like people with disabilities to have the opportunity to explore those things and to ask those questions in a forum where it's safe to do so, where people will allow them to think for themselves and to think outside and answer questions with questions, so that they can start to explore those things, rather than, well, the Bible says, or I read in this book, or my faith says. Well, I don't think that that's fair. I think most of us who are non-disabled experience our spirituality in a variety of different ways, and we have the choice to shut down or shut off what other people have to say. There are many people who I know whose parents have a very deep and abiding and very conservative religious faith, and the children simply don't buy it. But when you have an intellectual disability, it seems like you don't have the freedom to leave some of those things behind. So I don't really know the answer. I just believe that people with intellectual disabilities who I know, who have their own deep, abiding faith, whatever that faith may be, they seem to have this rock and this anchor, you know, that they can pull on when they need that. And I think that that's such an important thing to have in their life, but it's something that they develop for themselves, and it's something they believe themselves. It's not something imposed on them. So if we could find a way where people with disabilities could have an opportunity to experience and think about spirituality without people with agendas around them, I think we could do a lot of good for people with disabilities. But unfortunately, I don't know how to do that. One of the things that I'm looking at doing for some people with disabilities in our organization is we do diversity training for our staff but we don't do diversity training for people with disabilities. So we want to do some diversity training where we look at different faiths and we look at some different things so that people get to hear what different ideas are and what different thoughts are. We want to do this partly because we have some people with disabilities who can be very negative about other people's differences. Trying to figure out how to say that nicely. But I'm not even sure that that's going to do it. But if we could find a way, I think it would be an awesome thing to do. Sorry.
Wonderful, thank you.
Because I really don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. I like the idea that they're starting to include spiritual abuse as a list of abuses, you know.